Perfect. Okay, hi everyone. I will be talking about breastfeeding, breast milk versus formula feeding your infant. And I first wanted to talk about the issue. And there's been a long-standing issue for probably since formula really was invented about whether or not that is healthy or the best way to be feeding your child. Um, but because breast milk and breastfeeding is the only source of nutrients for infants. Mothers and scientists often argue which method is the best for the infant to provide the most benefits to the child's life. And so that's kind of what we'll be talking about today. Which one is the better option for your child's health? And I first wanted to talk about the differences between breastfeeding and formula feeding. So, breastfeeding is the process of feeding a mother's breast milk to her infant, either directly from the breast or by expressing the milk from the breast and bottle feeding it to the infant. And then, formula feeding are liquids or reconstituted powders fed to infants and young children to serve as substitutes for human milk. So, that will kind of give us a basis on what we need to um, understand, and then we can get into some current trends and prevalence rates. And so, as I was looking at this, I found that breastfeeding is more common among mothers, anyways. Um, and this was a study done in 2019 from the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. And it found that about 83.2% of mothers, um, or sorry, that 83.2% of infants started out receiving some breast milk, and that slowly declined at around 6 months, where it was 55.8%. And of course, we can compare that to the other um, the other percentages that are left for formula feeding. But over an infant's life, mothers are more likely to give their children breast milk rather than formula feeding. And so this is kind of the trend right now, um, to definitely breastfeed your infant more than formula feed. Um, and I love this quote. It says that breastfeeding is considered the touchstone for meeting the nutritional needs for neonates and infants. And so that's definitely something that's been pushed in the public and obviously by our government as well. And this is just a bit of the same statistics kind of in a graph for us to visualize better. Um, we see from birth down to 6 months, which is what researchers and scientists tell us is the age in which we should at least keep breastfeeding. Of course, breastfeed for as long as we want, but 6 months at least. Um, but yeah, it just kind of shows the decline, but also shows that towards the end of the time that a child will need milk, formula is starting to be used more. And here's the core argument for breastfeeding. There are definitely more benefits associated with it, such as cognitive skills, increased educational attainment, and higher incomes in adulthood. And of course, these long-term effects have to do with um, the short-term effects, of course, that cognitive development um, is being influenced by, which of course are the nutrients and development of the frontal lobes um, that breast milk can give. And I also provided the disadvantages as well. Because of the social norm associated with breastfeeding, there are definitely some negative implications and pressure that the mothers feel, such as guilt and shame if they can't perform this duty of breastfeeding. And also, it's time consuming and sometimes difficult for the mother too, and even for the baby to latch as well. But despite this, there's still this quote or idea that breast is best, um, basically meaning that breast milk is seen to be more nutritional for the infant. And this is definitely can be compared to the argument for formula feeding. And this formula has definitely the same nutrients as um, as breast milk. Um, and it's fortified with DHA and ARA, which supports brain, vision, and cognitive functioning. And so there are developmental advantages that formula feeding can give, just the same as breastfeeding. And the only downside um, of the outcomes associated with breastfeeding and even formula feeding, but that both are only correlational because experiments done are definitely non-ethical. So nothing can really be measured, and we can only connect factors and outcomes with what seem to be following the same trend. And some disadvantages are the stigma surrounding formula feeding, which is basically that it's not as good for your child. Um, and that also that mothers who tend to not want to breastfeed possess less knowledge on health than mothers that do. But overall, there are similar advantages to formula feeding and breastfeeding. Um, but as I was researching, I definitely believe that breastfeeding is more beneficial to the infant and mother than formula feeding. And some more benefits are lower infant illness and death, protection against infections, cognitive development, lower risk of obesity, and lower risk of diabetes. And there's also a lot of benefits for mothers as well, such as reduced rates of ovarian and breast cancer, reduced obesity, type 2 diabetes, and reduced heart disease. And some more benefits to the mother are its breastfeeding is cost effective and accessible. Breast milk changes with the growing needs of the child to match the nutrients that are needed and is not reflective of what the mother eats. So it is a more trustworthy substance. And I think this point is really important because while there are the same nutritional um, needs found in formula, overall, breastfeeding is more beneficial because the mother can instinct inherently match what the child needs at a certain age. And from my experiences, my sister, who just had a baby, about a year and a half ago, struggled with her baby's health. She only breastfed her child for about 3 months, and immediately after, she started having a lot of allergies, and her baby's health declined right when she stopped breastfeeding. And we often think that because her child was born really healthy and there were no other signs, that the lack of being breastfed led to those negative health outcomes. But of course, because um, there's no experiment done. We can only say it's correlated. But I do believe that the effects of breastfeeding um, definitely are higher than formula feeding. And it also creates, shared experiences between the mother and child, which is also really important. But I do believe that breastfeeding is the more preferred and better method to help deliver the nutrients needed to your child. But yeah, that is my presentation on breastfeeding, breast milk versus formula. Um, I hope you learned some beneficial outcomes and be able to um, create your own opinion and bias on this subject.